What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Quill and Hammer Reforging Fiction. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm Trevor. This is Zach. Zach, what's going on?
Well, today we're going to be reforging Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, book film combo number 5. So, Trev, I'm going to be honest, I'm not as much of an expert with this book film combo. So, why don't you get us started telling us what you think went well and maybe some things that you didn't like about the film?
All right. Well, I really enjoyed this film. I thought, as far as an adaptation of a book goes, they did a really good job um, putting it together, hitting all of the main points, getting the essence of the book down. The first thing that went well is obvious. Dolores Umbridge.
Right.
Whoever that actor is, I should have looked it up. She is perfect. You hate her more than you hate Voldemort at this point in your life. She is a disaster of a person, but she is so perfect in that role. I don't know if you could have picked anyone better to be Dolores Umbridge. She is just perfect.
So, what are some of the highlights from her character that you think make that claim reasonable?
All right, well, she's just so like one, she's sickly sweet but evil at the same time. And it's so hard to pull that off, but that's the essence of the character. She is just so dainty. I'm a whatever. I'm Dolores Jane Umbridge, the senior secretary to the Minister of Magic or whatever, and it's like she has this whole air about her, but you can tell she is just on a knife's edge of, you know, I have to be in control of everything. There is nothing,
Right.
like I don't know. She walks the line between I'm really good at being, sweet and nice and evil. And, she has the, this like I'm in control almost thing going on. And then you can see her towards the end of the movie slowly starting to, I don't want to say lose her mind, but kind of lose her mind. Like she just does a
Unravel.
really fantastic job. I can't point to any one thing because it's everything. There
Right.
is there's nothing about the character that did not go perfect.
I think what I like about the way the actor portrayed her is the sickly sweet is a very good description. And she's got this apathy and she weaves in her sickly sweet nature into her apathy. And the one of the scenes that I can think of is when she's dismissing Professor Trelawney and how she just doesn't care, but she keeps that dainty voice, sickly sweet. I keep saying that, but it was a great descriptor. Uh, Attitude, and the timbre of her voice is just like everything's fine, even though I'm telling you that you can no longer be here and I will send you to Azkaban if you come back onto this campus type thing,
Right.
but well, what else went well in the film?
Yeah, well, the timeline. I'm trying to think. In the Goblet of Fire, we thought, why did you spend so much time on the Yule Ball? Why not cut that down and really expand the maze, right? But here, I don't know if you can change much. So they did, you have the Dementors at the beginning, and then You have the Order of the Phoenix picking up Harry, taking him to Grimmauld Place. Then you've got the trial. Then they're at Hogwarts. Then, it everything just went smoothly. Dolores Jane Umbridge is there. She's the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. She's not going to teach them Defense Against the Dark Arts. Okay, they start Dumbledore's army. It's like you have the whole montage. Then she's trying to catch him, and then, like all of these things go together and lead up, and there's not like one unnecessary plot point. Hagrid's back. They've got Grop, which is nice. Let me look. You have the attack on Mr. Weasley and occlumency lessons, like all of these things that lead up to Harry at the end of the movie, going to the Ministry of Magic. Like everything, what am I trying to say? Everything pertinent to get them there happens.
Right.
It's not like, you know, you can't say, well, they missed this plot point. Like they kind of hit everything that was important from getting Harry to the Order of the Phoenix all the way to the Ministry of Magic. It was, like, yeah, they skipped the Quidditch stuff, and there are, other little things. Harry's romance with Cho that turns into kind of a disaster thing. Cho had a friend in the book, but you don't really need that. Like, all of these things happen, and I don't know, I just think it's really good. There's nothing that I would have said, you missed the attack on Mr. Weasley, or nope, you missed Snape's worst memory, or, all of these things. It's like everything that needed to happen to get them to the Ministry of Magic happened.
Right.
So anything about the movie that I'm not happy with, as far as like at Hogwarts goes, like they are very nitpicky little things.
Okay. Well,
Like, um, like this. I wish they would have talked more about Percy being, Percy, I guess. Like
selling out the family, so to
he's
speak.
selling out the family. That they could have just put in a little 5 minutes here, 2 minutes here kind of thing. Like, you know, I'm trying to remember how Percy worded it in the book, but he sends Ron and Al saying like, you know, Dolores Jane Umbridge is a delightful woman, and if you feel like Harry is bullying you or whatever, like you can sever ties. I can't remember how he says it, but like that's a main part in this book and in the next book, all the
Right.
way from book 4 when he kind of turns into the ministry hack, all the way to the end of Deathly Hallows, where he reconciles with the family
Right.
and admits that he was wrong, and starts fighting again.
Right.
So they miss that. Um, and then the other thing that I wish they had spent more time on before getting to the ministry, I really enjoyed Teacher Harry. You know,
Yeah.
and maybe I don't know if you can add more to it. I feel like they did a really good job with it because he it just feels like a really good amount of, hey, he's teaching and he's saying things, like think about this. Everyone started where we did now, so why not us? Why can't we be the next great wizards or whatever, you know?
Right.
And all of these things, I just think it's a really good fit, and you actually see Harry being a good wizard. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
Really competent.
I thought that was really good. So we've talked in the past, you know, that like Harry kind of just stumbles through a lot of things, and right now it's like, okay, you can see that Harry knows what he's talking about. He's teaching things. He's doing a good job. That's what I liked about it.
Right. Okay. Well, what things did you not like? What things would you change to improve the film?
All right, so like I said, all of the things that I would change, they are nitpicky little things, and most of them happen at the ministry.
Okay.
Um, the first thing is, I don't know, gosh, I can't even get comfortable. The smoke apparition. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
That bothers me. And like if it were just like you know, you appear there, great. But like there are scenes where they're running around and the Death Eaters are like half in smoke and half not and chasing them, and like
Hmm.
that bothers me quite a bit. And I don't know, like cinematically, to make it look good, or like, yeah, they're appearing or whatever, like I don't know. Does that make sense? Like
I
why did they make that choice?
I know what you mean. They gave them this pseudo flying ability, which they don't have in the book. And the whole point of apparition is it's supposed to be instantaneous. And what's the word? Um, the inconsistency within the film you see from the beginning when Fred and George apparate and scare Mrs. Weasley, which is a
Right.
funny little moment in the beginning. They just appear, and that's supposed to be the thing. It's startling, right? But
Right.
then towards the end, they're flying around in smoke. It's less apparition and it's more this superhero flying ability. But why does that bother you so much though? If say they never adapt everything completely faithfully, they make this change. I won't say it's small, I won't say it's big. They make a change. Why does this matter so much to you?
Well, see, I don't know, because in the long run it's not really that big of a deal, right? There's no reason that I can point to other than it's not how it was in the book. I know
Fair?
that's not a good reason, but it does bother me. The other thing that bothers me about it is that the Order of the Phoenix, when they apparate, their smoke is white and everyone, you know, the Death Eaters is black. Like that's not really how it would work if, you know. But like I it doesn't really matter. It is strictly I can't um it is strictly I can't get fully behind it because that's not how it was in the book. It didn't match my image of what apparition is or was, because what I think it is and what it is in the book clearly is, you know, Fred and George. Just they show up, pop,
Right.
scare Mrs. Weasley, you know, like that's how it should be. If they're gonna do that, then do it. But like cinematically, I understand like you kind of need something. And I guess you can get around it by saying, like, you know, technically you can't apparate in or out of, you know, the uh the Ministry of Magic. That's why they have all of the flu fireplace things,
Right,
and then even if you could apparate in and out of the Ministry of Magic, can you like the Department of Mysteries is supposed to be different.
right,
You're not you can't just willy-nilly go in there. The people that go in there, that work there, they're called unspeakables. So like it's supposed to be an even more secure place than the regular ministry. So I don't see how they could have apparated in and out. But as far as like a cinematic choice goes, like that is like I can understand it, I guess. I would have tried to do something different, but I don't know what you would do different to make it feel like the Death Eaters are everywhere and
right,
that they are just so overpowering the kids
right.
that like what would you do? How would you fix that?
Well, I think I don't mind, and I guess we have two problems here. Number one is your nitpicky problem of the smoke, maybe three problems. My problem is they can't fly just by using this smoke stuff. That's never in the book, and I do have a problem with that. And then number three is you can't apparate within the Ministry of Magic, right? So, as far as the smoke goes, I think you have to have some kind of a visual cue that somebody is apparating. And the smoke, I think, is fine. It was probably excessive in the film. It's like you see them come down in from the top and they kind of explode in this, I don't know, volcano of smoke. But, and so I think that was excessive. You can have maybe a little bit of smoke coming off of them. And I don't even mind the black versus white of Death Eaters and Order of the Phoenix to try and keep the viewer oriented, so to speak. But I don't like the coming down in from the top and having the big explosion. I think it was overdone. It needed to be on a smaller scale, enough to know that, okay, well, we just had a person apparate. They weren't just hiding in the shadows, but not so apparent.
Okay.
Um, the next thing, and I think maybe this goes into a bigger point in what needs to be fixed in the film, is, you talked about how it shows, all the smoke and them being everywhere shows how they were overwhelming the kids. But in the book, the Department of Mysteries was so much more expansive. There were multiple rooms that they all went through. They split up. They all had different experiences. And the Death Eaters sort of split up too and chased them. And then they all sort of reconvened in that room with the Arch and the Veil, right?
Right.
And I think showing some more of that, some more of the Department of Mysteries, showing the different perspectives of the characters and going through, their little adventures throughout the department and then reconvening, I think that would have been equally as effective as showing the plight that the kids were in. The in the film they all go together, they fall down into the room with the arch, and that's kind of it. None of them get injured, but in the book, they go separate ways. Uh, who is it? Somebody breaks their ankle. Ron is delusional and not all there because of the brain thing that
Right.
he touches, and um like they were not winning, and it was very apparent due to all their injuries and the Death Eaters were right on their tails. So I think you can still show the plight, and a more effective way to do it is to expand that Ministry of Magic, Department of Mystery scene. But then the question arises, well, what do you kick out earlier to make room for more Department of Mysteries?
right? See, that is ever our struggle with this because we aren't doing, expanded Lord of the Rings style, you know, movies. We have to stick within the general length of this movie. So what would you get rid of? Do you shorten the
I,
montage scene? Well, I don't like that because you're actually teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts. I guess you could cut out a little bit of Fred and George's escape, some of like you know what I mean? Like
I
there's not a
do.
lot that I would look to and say there's too much. Like you probably needed 20 more minutes in the movie to actually flesh out everything and make it smoother because it almost seems like everything that we're touching upon is not rushed, but slightly rushed, or could have been done a little bit more, you know?
And you're exactly right. The problem with this is it's the largest book in the franchise, and you don't get any extra time just because there's 300 extra pages.
Right.
And my the problem that I have is there's so much that is necessary to get Harry from the Dursleys all the way to the Ministry of Magic, that it's like everything they showed in the film is a necessary plot point. They
Right.
completely took out Quidditch. They shortened um, Fred and George's tormenting of Umbridge. That went on for a week in the book,
Hmm.
and I would have loved to see more of that to show how, yeah, maybe they don't care to apply themselves to school, but they are extremely intelligent wizards,
Right.
but it's like you can't have all that. They cut out some of Hagrid's description of his travels. You know what I mean? There's so much that they cut out. All the OWLs. You
Yeah.
see them in there taking an exam for 20 seconds before Fred and George burst in on their brooms, but it's it's hard to say what would you cut out, and I don't know that I have an answer.
Right. So I as much as I would like to expand the Department of Mysteries, because I agree, there are so many interesting things that happen in there. You've got the brains. There's like a scene of an egg expanding into a chicken and then shrinking back down to an egg, and then a Death Eater's head
Right.
gets caught in there. They somehow a stray spell destroys all of the time turners. Like there are so many
Hmm.
different things that happen that are really cool, but you can't show all of that because you could do probably 30 minutes of being chased around by Death Eaters and
Hmm.
all of these things happening, but you just can't quite fit all of that in. And then it becomes, okay, well, what do you fix? What do you take out? Like what do you prioritize? And like we said, there's just too much to get Harry from point A to point B that you can't really justify getting rid of much.
Right.
But I will say, moving on, something that I would change is the dueling. I don't like how they duel. Um, for two reasons. Everyone is like there's no nuance to it. It's just white light going back and forth or whatever. And then there's no I don't know. Have we talked about this? Like the cool thing about magic is like you can think outside of the box. You can, you know, you have all these different spells. Someone likes this kind of spell. Someone likes this kind of spell. Someone's better at this than that, like you have all of these different things going on, but you don't see any of that nuance. And then like I don't know. I don't know how to explain the Death Eater fight scene with the Order of the Phoenix. Like there's no nuance. And I get like you can't have a lot, but like I would have had different colors of spells and flashes and things, you know, because that's how it should be. Someone
Right.
is, there you try different things. I think once you and I had a discussion where it's like there's not to jump ahead, but like in what's the last one? Deathly Hallows, there's a scene where McGonagall and Snape are fighting. Um,
Hmm.
and it's like McGonagall transfigures something, a whole bunch of knives, and throws them at Snape, and Snape animates a something. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's like this giant chess match between two extremely powerful and knowledgeable wizards, and they're countering one another. They're doing different things, like, but none of that really happens. It's just kind of, you know what I mean? Am I making any
I
sense
do.
there?
I do. It's they're trading white light back and forth, sort of in like a fencing match.
Right.
And that really downgrades the idea of magic. And, I've always thought, and I think we'll get to this in a second with Dumbledore and Voldemort's fight, but the standard spells and curses and that sort of thing, in my mind, those should be like the simplest form of magic, so to speak. And a truly great witch or wizard should be able to come up with their own stuff. And I think the reason I feel that way is because you see Dumbledore and Voldemort battling it out using the elements, using everything around them. In the book, just like how Snape animates a suit of armor that you mentioned in the fight between he and McGonagall. But in the book, Dumbledore animates the statues of what is it, the witch and the wizard standing tall and all the other, I can't remember what they call it,
Right.
but Dumbledore animates all of those statues, one to protect Harry, one to keep Bellatrix out of the way, and the others to sort of harass Voldemort, right? And then you see the giant ball of water that Dumbledore conjures and entraps Voldemort in, and things like that. And in the movie, you have um, Voldemort take all these shards of glass and send them flying at Dumbledore, and he puts up this. I mean, I don't even know what you would call it, some kind of force field, some kind of air force field that then transforms them back into sand instead of glass. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
just like you said, it's this chess match. It's strike and counter strike, and it's not necessarily just stupefy, flipendo or whatever. It's they're using unique magic to fight each other instead of standard spells and curses, and it's hard to show that. It's hard to show that in a multi-wizard battle between like the Death Eaters and the Order of the Phoenix. But I do think at a very minimum, like you said, they should have at least different colors of light to show that they're doing different spells instead of just the assumed stupefy, 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 stupefy. It's like there's more than just the stunning spell, you know?
Well, it is, and I guess there are varying levels. So like, yeah, Harry and the six at the Ministry, they are not, they are not, what's the word?
Advanced enough?
Advanced enough, yeah. But like, yeah, they can do the Protego shield spell. They can do Stupefy. They can do Expelliarmus. They can do, you know, these different things. But, magic is supposed to be, hard,
Right.
right? Like, there's a reason, you know, and maybe, each person should have different affinities and,
I
like,
agree with that.
um I'm trying to think of an example, but like, Hermione can do almost anything except for a real, she struggles with the Patronus charm. And,
Hmm.
some people can't even really do the Patronus charm. Some people like, what's his name? Lockhart in number two, like he sucked at most things, but he was really good at memory charms. Like
Right.
you have an affinity for things. So like you've got Death Eaters who have their own spells that they're really good at. And, like it's not all stupefy and whatever. It's like, all right, well, I'm gonna hit you with this dark magic spell or whatever, And you
Right.
can't necessarily show all of that in a movie, but you can show different colors of lights, and
Right.
like and clearly, they're not trying to kill the kids, but yet. They're not trying to kill them yet. Uh,
Right.
so like you have this kind of, you know, toned down stuff, but as soon as the Order of the Phoenix gets there, it should be stepped up.
Right.
Also, can we talk about Nice One, James?
Nice one, James.
We
It
take
hurts
that
every
little
time.
every time
Every time it hurts.
it hurts.
And there are quite a few lines in the film that were added or changed, and of them all, that one I think it hits every single time. It hits and it hurts, and then
Every
he's gone.
every time. It I mean, how many times have I seen that movie? And still, last night when I was going through it, it was like, nice one, James. And then he's dead. And like, that's the last thing that Harry hears from Sirius. Like, oh man, it just hurts.
It
But
hits you every time.
it hits you every time. But let's jump ahead because we're gonna run out of time. Unless you have something you want to say about that.
Phew. Pardon me. The only other thing that I wanted to say is in terms of adding dialogue, I think one of the overlooked changes that they made was when Harry tells Sirius how he's feeling. And in the film, Sirius says, "You're not a bad person. You're a very good person who very bad things have happened to. The world isn't made up of good people and Death Eaters. We all have light and darkness inside of us." And he comforts Harry, says, "Soon we're going to be a proper family," all these things. But in the book, he kind of is like, "Oh, you're fine, suck it up," and then he leaves, right? And Harry's really upset about that. But I think that was an excellent change in the film because it goes along with the whole theme that they were illustrating, which is you're stronger with the people that you love rather than by yourself.
Right.
And in the film, Sirius is sort of the beacon of hope figure. You know what I mean? He represents hope a little bit in the film.
Right.
And so just all those little things just make the nice one, James, even hurt even more. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was very, very good filmmaking on the producer and director's parts.
I I agree. Um, Speaking of that, let's move on to Sirius has been killed, Harry chases Bellatrix, and then the fight happens. Now there is one thing between Dumbledore and Voldemort that just bothers me to no end. It's
Okay.
the, you know, uh when the beams of light from their wand connect at the
Hmm.
start. And then you've got this weird like green and red lightning water kind of thing. Like you know what I'm talking about? You can you
I
picture what I'm
can
saying?
I can picture what you're saying. Tell me why it bothers you and remind me what they're trying to show in the book with that scene.
Well, see, I don't remember like I don't think in the book their wands ever connect because they the beam of light thing like that happened once as far as I'm aware, and that was when Harry and Voldemort duel in the graveyard. And
Right.
maybe I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, leave a comment. But I don't know that that happens, because they are throwing different spells at each other you know, all the time, not just it bothers me that it's like this beam of light, like I am shooting a stream of magic at you and you're shooting it at me, and like it doesn't work in as far as the world goes, Zach. It
The
bothers me that that's a thing.
Because the connection between Harry and Voldemort in the graveyard, that was priori incantatum
Yes.
or something similar to that. And the reason that was able to happen is because their cores were twin cores.
Yep.
But otherwise, that shouldn't be a thing, is what you're saying.
Yes. And like think of, it's like I don't know, like it's not an easy thing to put, two beams of light and hit them together and spells and things. And they don't, with like rare exceptions, it's not like your wand is just shooting a, stream of magic at someone. A
Right.
spell shoots the spell or makes something appear or happens or whatever. There's like, you know, a couple of things where like there's the water charm, augmenti or whatever, and other things like, but it just is like, okay, why are we doing this? And then why does it look this way, this weird water lightning stuff. I don't know. It's a nitpicky thing. It doesn't really matter, but every time that duel starts, I sit there and think, this is the dumbest thing in the world. I can't believe they screwed up this duel between Voldemort and Dumbledore. And then they start doing things like,
Right.
you know, Voldemort has that big fire dragon snake thing, and you know, Dumbledore does the water, and then Voldemort has the glass thing, and he turns the glass to the sand, and all of this stuff, and it's like this chess match, and then they do a good job, and that's the contrast between that and this bugs me, I guess.
I understand. I can understand where you're coming from. Um, well, I can't think of how many minutes that little scene would have taken, but it's things like that where if you take out that, you have time for something else.
Right.
You have time for, more Fred and George. You have time to show them running through at least one extra room in the Department of Mysteries. So there are things that even if they're small, you can make an adjustment and show something that's probably more interesting and less incongruous with the world.
Right, right. Um, the last thing I wanted to talk about, is the way that they portrayed Harry being possessed.
Okay, how do you mean?
So in the book, like, yeah, Voldemort can touch Harry because he, used his blood to reanimate himself.
Hmm.
But like when he when Voldemort possesses Harry, he is hurting just as much as Harry is, right?
Right.
And he can't stand to be in Harry's body. Harry can't stand, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So like the entire scene is Voldemort and Harry battling, but they're both in pain, and Voldemort is like, if if nothing matters, kill the boy, strike me down, Dumbledore, he's taunting Dumbledore, but that doesn't really happen. It ends up being this like battle of the minds between Harry and Voldemort, and like almost like Voldemort could have done that indefinitely. And so then you've got Harry battling himself like, am I a dark wizard? Am I not?
Hmm.
He looks in the mirror and he sees Voldemort's face on him, like all of these things. And then he, you know, sees all the bad things that have happened to him. And then he sees his friends and his, family and all of the things. And, it shows that love outweighs hate and everything. And Harry says, I feel sorry for you, Like, I don't dislike that message, but I don't like that in the movie. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying, but I can't picture why, like, what would you have rather had happen then? Would you rather have had it just been exactly like the book or something else, and why?
Yes, I would have rather had it be like the book because I don't like that. I mean, it's like what's stopping Voldemort in the future from possessing Harry now? You know what I mean? Like if it doesn't hurt him, if it doesn't cause any consequences, then why not use that connection forever? But because it hurts, because it that connection could be used both ways, now Voldemort is like, all right, I gotta shield myself from that because one, it sucked, it hurt. Two, what if Harry learns how to use it against me in the future, kind of thing? But
I see
like,
what you're saying.
but like that isn't the case. It's like Voldemort could have done that forever, but then Harry has to learn how to shut him out of his mind, which like is fine. I wish Harry would have learned occlumency, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But that's not where it happens. That's not, I don't know. I don't know. I can't explain why it bothers me, Zach. It just does.
I understand what you mean, and I'm gonna give my interpretation of that scene, and you can take it or leave it. I think you keep it, and here's the reason why. So in the book, the idea is, he's feeling the pain of Sirius's loss, the same as Harry is, and he can't stand feeling that, right? That's
Right.
why he leaves. That's the hurt that you're talking about. In the film, my interpretation of it is, he's torturing Harry, he's tormenting him, and then Harry comes to the realization that Voldemort will never know love, he'll never know friendship, as he says, and he makes Voldemort feel that loss, and that's what drives him out. So it's the same idea, but it's that It's not, I'm feeling the loss of Sirius, and Voldemort's like, oh, well, that sucks. I don't want to feel what Harry's feeling. In my mind, it's that Harry makes Voldemort realize and come to terms or confront his own feelings of, I will never know friendship, I will never know love, and that is a hole that cannot be filled. And it's the same effect. He's like, so I can't, that hurts too much to comprehend. So I have to get out of Harry and I have to shield myself from him because what if he can use that against me? So in my mind, it's the same idea. Maybe they didn't spell it out as much as you can in a book, but it's the same effect. It's the same uh, pathway, I guess, to getting him out and getting the same result, but it's a different focus. It's Harry making Voldemort realize what he will never have versus just tertiarily feeling Harry's loss and be like, oh, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to touch that. It's identifying something within Voldemort, a character flaw within himself that he can't reconcile. So that's my interpretation. Take it or leave it. But I say you keep the possession and the mental battle exactly how it is for that reason.
Fair enough. And maybe Zach, my problem is I I want everything to be like it is in the book.
Fair.
And I'm too rigid or whatever, and that's okay. But yeah, I will concede the point to you begrudgingly because I like I like your interpretation of it, but I still don't think I like the scene. It's not my favorite scene of the movie, I guess.
That's fair. That's fair. And there's always the hard thing with adapting a book or anything to film is you can never have it exactly the same.
Right.
There are things that you can put on paper that just don't translate to the big screen. And that's the eternal struggle of filmmakers, and apparently it's the eternal struggle that we have decided to take upon ourselves.
It is. And the problem that we all find, the problem that you and I have, and that everyone has, is we all read these books and then we have our imagination telling us this is what it looks like.
Right,
But your imagination and my imagination would produce slightly, I mean, you would have all of the same things, but it would be different.
right,
It would look different, it would feel different because it's based on, what you're going through at the time and what your mind thinks and how you slightly picture things, and so that's fine. But to get back to the very beginning of our discussion, I think they did such a really good job with this movie that really all of these nitpicky things that we're talking about, like what would you know, like we said, you've got so much that happens to get Harry from, the Dursleys all the way to the Ministry of Magic that it's like, what would you take out?
right,
And then, you've only got so much time left in the movie, and there's so many things that happen at the Ministry of Magic and the Department of Mysteries and everything that, like, you don't necessarily have time to give it the credit it deserves to that, do justice to that entire scene. And so you have to hit the highlights. Death Eaters arrive, there's a fight, the Order of the Phoenix arrives, Sirius dies, Voldemort appears,
right,
Dumbledore and Voldemort duel, the Ministry of Magic all appear and they see him there and they realize, oh my gosh, he's back. Movie ends. Like, you know what I mean?
right,
There's just,
right.
so much that you could elaborate on and you could have done this in 2 movies. And
You absolutely could have done this in 2 movies and not had a single thing that wasn't pertinent.
right. And I think it's a shame. I do. I'm gonna go on a small rant. Um, it's a shame that this was done in the 2000s because nowadays, like right now, they're doing the Jack Reacher series on Amazon, or they did Game of Thrones, even though I don't think you watched that. I didn't watch the Game of
No.
Thrones. Um, but like you can adapt it a little bit more, and one of my coworkers, he and I were talking yesterday, and it's like essentially these series that they're creating become extra long movies instead
Oh
of
yeah.
broken down into hour segments.
Hmm.
Like if we had done that with each book, and we're gonna reserve judgment. They are redoing the Harry Potter, stuff, so like maybe they will do it justice. Although,
Maybe.
although if who they cast as Snape is any indication, maybe not. But we will reserve judgment until they come out. But if you did it like the Jack Reacher series, which I thought they did a really good job catching the essence, doing that kind of thing, like you could do 6 or 7 episodes of each Harry Potter book and
Yep.
stick pretty close to everything that happens, and I don't know, do a really good job at capturing the essence of every book. Now, the only problem I have with that is the first 3 books are significantly shorter than the rest of them. And as we
Right.
talked about when we went through Sorcerer's Stone and the Chamber of Secrets, they did a really good job of, you know. So it's like, what do you expand in those versus, you know,
Well, and then that's the hard thing is do you throw in things that didn't happen just to fill for time?
right,
Or do you say, okay, well, season one is instead of taking a whole book for one season, do you take 2 seasons and do one, two, and three just all in a row? You know what I mean? It's hard to say, but you run the risk of padding for filler time. And I don't know, I see where you're coming from and will reserve judgment when the HBO series comes out, but I my fear is that it will end up being like the Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus, which I'm sure we'll get into, but spoiler alert, I wasn't really a fan of. I didn't think they did a very good job adapting it, and I was pretty disappointed. And so I worry that something like that will happen where they don't capture the tone or they try and, not enough happens in each episode because it's a 6 hour long book and you're trying to stretch that into 8 hours of film, so I don't know. We'll have to see. But for sure, the later books, 5, 6, and 7 would have greatly benefited from that sort of an adaptation format.
right. And I feel like if you did that here, and and not to get too in depth, but there are a lot of different things that you could do. But I feel like once we get here, there's so much we could do. I mean, you could have an episode, 45-minute episode of they got to the ministry and when Sirius dies. Like
Right.
45 minutes of just that, and then there's just so much that could have gone on that you could expand on and you could make, I don't know, whatever, but I digress. As far as the scope of this podcast goes, though, I feel like the movie did as well a job as you could, capturing everything from beginning to end. And really, I'm nitpicky about a couple of little things here and there, but like I don't know if you could really change any of the main plot points, any of the pacing. There's just it's, you know,
I mean, it's the impossible task. They really did pick all the best plot points and all the best scenes to fit in there. I mean, like I said, I really would have loved to see the halls of Hogwarts filled like a swamp from Fred and George, but it's like, but it doesn't serve the purpose of pushing Harry to the Ministry. And so you got to cut it out. You know,
right,
you have to make those choices, and I don't think we could have made any different choices. That's the hard thing.
right,
But I mean, they really did do a fantastic job overall.
right. Well, I think Zach, let's just leave it there. Anything we say is going to be beating the horse to death, so we're going to leave it there. If you guys have any movies or anything out there that you want us to, movies or books or video games, anything that you want us to reforge, leave it in the comments so we can get to it next time. If you have liked this video, please subscribe, like, share it with friends. It really does help us. And Zach, any parting words?
Tell us how you would reforge the Order of the Phoenix. What did you think worked well? What do you think you would have picked to put in and take out as opposed to what they already had? Next week, we'll be doing the Half-Blood Prince. So tune back in and prep with us and get ready to tell us what you would do in the comments next week. But until then, we've been Zach and Trevor, Quill and Hammer, and Reforging Fiction.